Before the race even began, the internet had already decided the ending. Commentators whispered it, headlines hinted at it, and the crowd believed it. This was supposed to be a routine victory, a predictable finish, another highlight reel moment for a swimmer everyone already admired. But sports has a way of punishing certainty. On this day, in a packed aquatic arena humming with expectation, a single underestimated athlete would rewrite the script. What followed wasn't just a race. It was a reminder that belief, discipline, and silence can be more powerful than hype. The event was an international invitational meet, streamed worldwide and treated like a formality by most analysts. Cameras followed the Australian favorite as he warmed up, his strokes smooth, his confidence obvious. Medals already hung in the imaginations of fans. Few lenses bothered to linger on the swimmer from the Philippines, standing quietly 2 lanes away. His cap was plain, his posture calm, and his name barely mentioned. To most viewers, he was filler, someone meant to complete the lineup, not challenge the outcome. The Australian swimmer had earned his reputation. Years of podium finishes, national records, and endorsement deals had shaped him into a symbol of dominance. He smiled easily during interviews, joking about breaking another meet record. When asked about his competition, he answered politely but vaguely, admitting he hadn't studied them much. It wasn't arrogance, exactly, more like habit. Winning had become routine. He had trained for pressure, but not for surprise, and certainly not for someone the world had already dismissed. The Filipino athlete's journey looked very different. He grew up training in a community pool that doubled as a public swimming space, often sharing lanes with children and elderly locals. His early mornings were spent dodging distractions, counting strokes, and imagining races he couldn't yet afford to attend. Funding was scarce, equipment outdated, and international exposure minimal. But discipline filled the gaps. Every lap was deliberate. Every breath had purpose. He learned to compete first with fatigue, then with doubt, long before facing elite opponents. What few knew was that the Filipino swimmer had been preparing for this meet for over a year. He studied race footage late at night, analyzing pacing strategies and turn efficiencies. Without a large coaching staff, he became his own analyst, noting patterns others overlooked. He trained altitude-style breath control in humid conditions, pushing his lungs beyond comfort. While the spotlight shone elsewhere, he built resilience quietly, convinced that opportunity didn't announce itself. It revealed itself when preparation met the unexpected. On race day, the contrast between the two swimmers was striking. The Australian laughed with teammates, moving confidently between warm-up lanes. The Filipino athlete sat alone, eyes closed, headphones on, replaying the race in his mind. He wasn't visualizing victory, he was visualizing execution. Each stroke, each turn, each split time lived clearly in his thoughts. To him, the race had already happened dozens of times. This version would simply be the loudest and most visible. As the swimmers were called to the blocks, the crowd's energy sharpened. Chants echoed, flags waved, and phones lifted in anticipation. The Australian received the loudest applause, nodding appreciatively. The Filipino swimmer stepped up with no ceremony. His name drew polite claps, quickly swallowed by noise. He adjusted his goggles, took a deep breath, and lowered his head. In that moment, the noise faded. What remained was water, timing, and a promise he had made to himself years ago. The starting horn cut through the air, and 8 bodies sliced into the pool. The Australian surged forward instantly, his first strokes powerful and commanding. Commentators praised his explosive start, already calling the race in his favor. The Filipino swimmer stayed controlled, deliberately holding back, letting others burn energy early. To the untrained eye, it looked like hesitation. To him, it was strategy. He counted strokes, monitored his breathing, and waited patiently for the race to reveal its true shape. By the first turn, the Australian had established a clear lead. Cameras locked onto him, graphics highlighting his split times. The Filipino swimmer sat in fourth, exactly where he planned to be. His turns were clean, his kicks efficient, conserving energy. Coaches watching closely noticed something unusual. His stroke rate never changed. While others adjusted frantically to keep pace, he remained steady, swimming his race, not chasing someone else's expectations. At the halfway mark, fatigue began creeping into the field. Shoulders tightened, kicks shortened, and breathing patterns broke. The Australian still led, but his advantage narrowed slightly. Commentators blamed turbulence, lane resistance, anything but the possibility of being challenged. Meanwhile, the Filipino swimmer began his move. His tempo increased subtly, almost invisibly, but his speed told a different story. One by one, he edged past competitors, his lane suddenly impossible to ignore. The third turn changed everything. The Filipino swimmer executed it flawlessly, pushing off the wall with explosive precision. He surfaced with momentum, cutting into the Australian's lead. The crowd noticed. A murmur spread, growing louder with each stroke. Cameras hesitated, unsure whether to abandon the expected narrative. The Australian sensed movement beside him and glanced briefly, confusion flashing across his face. For the first time, the race felt unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity breeds doubt. With 50 meters remaining, the arena was electric. The Australian dug deep, relying on instinct and experience. His strokes grew heavier, but his will refused to yield. The Filipino swimmer, however, looked composed, almost calm. His breathing remained controlled, his form intact. Years of training under less than ideal conditions had taught him to thrive in discomfort. While others fought the water, he worked with it, each stroke a quiet declaration that he belonged here. The final stretch unfolded in seconds that felt eternal. Side by side, the two swimmers raced toward the wall. The Australian threw everything forward, muscles screaming, reputation on the line. The Filipino swimmer matched him stroke for stroke, eyes fixed, mind clear. The crowd stood as one, unsure who to cheer for now. This was no longer a formality. It was a question mark, a challenge to every assumption made before the horn ever sounded. The finish was chaotic. Both swimmers lunged, hands outstretched, water exploding around them. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The scoreboard lagged, numbers blinking uncertainly. The Australian looked up first, searching for confirmation. The Filipino swimmer stayed still, breathing hard, refusing to guess. When the final times appeared, the arena fell silent, then erupted. The Filipino athlete had won by the slimmest margin imaginable. Not by luck, not by error, but by execution. Shock rippled through the venue. Commentators scrambled to adjust their language, replaying the finish from every angle. The Australian leaned against the lane rope, disbelief etched across his face. He wasn't angry, just stunned. He approached the Filipino swimmer, offering a handshake that lingered longer than expected. In that gesture was respect, recognition, and a quiet acknowledgement that greatness had just arrived from an unexpected place. For the Filipino athlete, the moment felt surreal. Years of invisible effort condensed into a single time on a screen. He thought of early mornings, missed social events, and doubts whispered by others and himself. Standing on the pool deck, medal around his neck, he didn't celebrate wildly. Instead, he closed his eyes briefly, grounding himself. This wasn't an ending, it was proof. Proof that preparation doesn't need permission to matter. The internet reacted instantly. Clips of the race spread across platforms, framed as the upset of the year. Headlines shifted tone, praising humility and perseverance. Viewers dug into the Filipino swimmer's background, surprised by how little coverage he'd received before. Questions emerged about scouting, funding, and why some athletes are overlooked until they force attention. The narrative had changed, and it wasn't just about one race, it was about how we define potential. Interviews after the event told contrasting stories. The Australian spoke candidly, admitting he'd underestimated the field and learned a hard lesson. There was no bitterness, only resolve. The Filipino swimmer spoke softly, crediting his training and support system, emphasizing respect for all competitors. He didn't frame the win as revenge or defiance. Instead, he framed it as opportunity meeting readiness, a message that resonated far beyond the pool. Behind the scenes, coaches and analysts dissected the race. They noted the Filipino swimmer's discipline, his negative split strategy, and technical precision. None of it was accidental. What surprised them most wasn't his speed, but his composure. In a high-pressure environment designed to overwhelm, he had stayed present. That mental strength, built without constant validation, became the most discussed element of his performance. For young athletes watching from home, especially those without elite facilities or recognition, the race became symbolic. It challenged the idea that success follows visibility. The Filipino swimmer hadn't waited to be believed in. He had believed first. Messages poured in from aspiring competitors who saw themselves reflected in his quiet determination. The ripple effect extended beyond medals, inspiring conversations about access, perseverance, and the hidden depth of global talent. The Australian swimmer returned to training with renewed focus. Losing didn't diminish his legacy, it refined it. He spoke openly about complacency and the importance of respecting every competitor. In later races, his intensity sharpened, his preparation more thorough. The upset hadn't broken him. It had reminded him why he started swimming in the first place. Even dominance, he realized, must be defended with humility. Meanwhile, the Filipino athlete faced a new challenge: attention. Sponsorship offers, media requests, and expectations arrived quickly. Navigating this unfamiliar world required the same discipline he used in training. He remained selective, prioritizing long-term growth over sudden fame. His focus stayed on improvement, not applause. Winning once was meaningful. Sustaining excellence would be the true test. As months passed, the race continued to be referenced in documentaries, highlight reels, and coaching seminars. It became a case study in preparation versus perception. Analysts emphasized that data doesn't always capture hunger, and rankings don't measure resilience. The story endured because it felt universal. Everyone has been underestimated at some point. Few get a moment to answer back so clearly. The two swimmers crossed paths again at another meet, exchanging nods and brief smiles. There was no rivalry fueled by resentment, only mutual respect. Both had evolved because of that single race. One learned to never assume. The other learned he could belong anywhere. Their journeys diverged, but that moment linked them permanently in the sport's history. In retrospect, the signs had always been there. The Filipino swimmer's steady progress, his consistency, his refusal to chase attention. They were easy to miss in a world obsessed with highlights and hype. But greatness often whispers before it roars. That race was the roar, a moment when preparation demanded to be seen. The lesson wasn't that favorites should be doubted, or that underdogs always win. It was simpler and deeper than that. Effort compounds quietly. Discipline accumulates invisibly. And when opportunity finally arrives, it doesn't care about narratives. It rewards readiness. The pool didn't choose a story, it revealed one. Years from now, times will be broken and records surpassed. But this race will remain memorable not because of numbers, but because of meaning. It challenged assumptions, reshaped perspectives, and reminded audiences why sports matter. Not for certainty, but for possibility. Some victories echo louder than others. This one echoed because it belonged to anyone who has ever trained in silence, believed without validation, and waited patiently for a chance. It wasn't just a win for one swimmer, it was a victory for unseen effort everywhere. As the water settled and the crowd dispersed, the pool returned to stillness. But something had shifted. Expectations had been broken, not by chance, but by commitment. The underestimated athlete had spoken, not with words, but with performance. And that is what happened next. Not a miracle, not a fluke, but a moment earned stroke by stroke. A reminder that the most dangerous competitor is often the one no one is watching, until it's too late.